October 11th, 1944. 180 miles northeast of Saipan, Commander Yasumasa Nakagawa stood in the control room of submarine RO-41, staring at the depth gauge. 245 feet. The needle trembled with each distant explosion above. His hydrophone operator's whisper cut through the silence. 12 destroyers, sir. Pattern search. Range closing. Nakagawa had commanded RO-41 for 8 months. He'd survived 14 depth charge attacks. He knew American tactics. He knew their technology. He knew the odds. 12 U.S. destroyers equipped with QHB sonar could detect a submarine at 3,000 yards. His Japanese hydrophones could hear them at 800 yards maximum. The Americans could track him in 3 dimensions. He could only listen and guess. The mathematics were brutal. 12 destroyers. 1 submarine. Open ocean. No thermocline layer to hide under, or so his charts indicated. But Nakagawa had read something 3 months earlier. A report from I-19's commander, a single paragraph about water temperature inversions south of Saipan, about a layer where sonar beams bent upward instead of penetrating downward. His executive officer approached. "Orders, sir." Nakagawa looked at the depth gauge again, then at the temperature reading. 78 degrees Fahrenheit at 245 feet. "Take us to 280 feet, he said. "Slow descent, silent running." The executive officer's face went pale. RO-41's maximum safe depth was 245 feet. The U.S. Navy's QHB sonar system represented 3 years of intensive development. It transmitted focused acoustic pulses at 24 kilohertz. Maximum detection range, 3,000 yards in optimal conditions. The system could track multiple targets simultaneously, calculate depth, speed, and bearing with mechanical precision. American destroyer crews trained for months on QHB operation. They understood acoustic propagation, water layer effects, target discrimination. They knew how to coordinate attacks with other ships, creating overlapping detection zones that left no escape corridor. Japanese submarines had hydrophones, passive listening devices that detected propeller noise and hull vibrations. Maximum effective range, 800 yards. No active transmission, no precise ranging, just sound and the operator's experience. The gap wasn't just technological, it was tactical. American destroyers hunted in coordinated groups. They used creeping attack patterns, one ship maintaining sonar contact while others positioned for depth charge runs. They communicated via TBS radio, sharing target data in real time. They had unlimited depth charges, unlimited fuel, unlimited time. Japanese submarines had one advantage: desperation breeds innovation. Nakagawa knew the American pattern. 12 destroyers meant a search grid 15 miles across, each destroyer covering a sector, overlapping coverage, no gaps. Once detected, a submarine had perhaps 8 minutes before the first depth charge pattern arrived. RO-41 had been detected 47 minutes ago. The Americans were playing with him, tracking his every move, waiting for him to surface, to run out of battery power, to make a mistake. Nakagawa had no intention of giving them that satisfaction. But he needed something the Americans didn't expect, something their technology couldn't overcome. He needed the ocean itself to hide him. 280 feet, sir. Hull stress increasing. Nakagawa heard the steel groan. RO-41 was a Type RO submarine, 245 feet maximum safe depth. At 280 feet, every rivet, every weld, every seal was beyond design limits. But the temperature gauge told him what he needed to know. At 245 feet, 78 degrees Fahrenheit. At 260 feet, 76 degrees Fahrenheit. At 275 feet, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. 10 degrees in 30 feet. A thermocline layer. The report from I-19 had described it. A boundary where warm surface water met cold deep water. The temperature difference created a density barrier. Sonar beams hitting that barrier didn't penetrate. They refracted upward, bending away from targets below. It was physics. Simple physics. But it required something American destroyer captains rarely encountered. A submarine commander, willing to exceed safe depth limits to reach the layer. Level at 280 feet. Nakagawa ordered. All stop. Silent running protocol. The executive officer relayed commands in whispers. The engine room secured the electric motors. The crew stopped moving, stopped breathing loudly, stopped everything that created noise. In the sonar room above, 12 American destroyers transmitted their QHB pulses. Nakagawa imagined the sound waves traveling downward through warm water, hitting the thermocline at 265 feet, bending upward toward the surface. RO-41 sat 15 feet below that boundary, invisible. But there was a problem. The thermocline wasn't perfect. It didn't block all sound. Low-frequency noise, hull creaks, machinery vibrations, human movement could still penetrate. And American hydrophone operators were trained to listen for exactly those sounds. Nakagawa walked through the control room, making eye contact with each crew member. No words, just a look that said, "Your life depends on absolute silence." A young torpedoman shifted his weight. His boot scraped against the deck plate. The sound echoed through the hull like a gunshot. Everyone froze. Above them, the destroyer pattern changed. 3 ships converged on their position. Nakagawa heard the propeller sounds intensify through the hull. Not through hydrophones, but through the steel itself. The Americans had heard something. Not enough for a precise fix, but enough to investigate. "Depth charges," the hydrophone operator whispered. "Pattern drop. Bearing 340. Range 800 yards. Nakagawa counted seconds. Depth charges fell at roughly 10 feet per second. From surface to 280 feet. 28 seconds. At 20 seconds he heard them. A distant whistling sound, growing louder. At 25 seconds, the first explosion. The shockwave hit like a physical blow. Light bulbs shattered. Dust rained from overhead pipes. A gauge cracked. The hull groaned, a deep metallic scream that said the steel was at its limit. But RO-41 held. The explosions continued. 12 charges. Then silence. Nakagawa checked the depth gauge. Still 280 feet. Still below the thermocline. Still invisible to QHB sonar. The Americans were guessing now, dropping charges on probability, not precision. That meant the thermocline was working. "Sir, battery power at 40%. Nakagawa nodded. At silent running speed, barely enough to maintain depth control, RO-41 could last 6 hours. But that assumed the hull remained intact. At 280 feet, every minute increased the risk of catastrophic failure. He had another problem. The Americans knew he was here. They'd lost sonar contact, but they had his last known position. Standard U.S. Navy doctrine called for a persistent search pattern, destroyers maintaining station for up to 12 hours, waiting for the submarine to move, to make noise, to reveal itself. Nakagawa couldn't wait 12 hours. He couldn't wait 6 hours. He needed to move, but movement meant noise, and noise meant detection. Unless he could move during a moment when the Americans weren't listening. He studied the tactical situation. 12 destroyers in a search grid, each destroyer running active sonar continuously. But sonar wasn't continuous. It pulsed. Transmission, pause, listen for return. Transmission, pause, listen. The pause was the vulnerability. "Hydrophone operator," Nakagawa said quietly. "Time the sonar pulses. All 12 destroyers. I need the synchronization pattern." For 20 minutes, the operator listened and recorded. Nakagawa watched him work. Pencil scratching on paper, numbers accumulating. Finally, "Sir, I have it. Pulses are staggered, but there's a gap. Every 127 seconds, all 12 destroyers pause simultaneously for 4.2 seconds. 4.2 seconds. Enough time to move perhaps 30 yards at slow speed. Not enough to escape, but enough to shift position, to break the American's mental map of where he should be." Nakagawa made his decision. "On my mark. Ahead 1/3 for exactly 4 seconds. Then all stop." The crew tensed. 4 seconds of motor noise. 4 seconds of vulnerability. The electric motor engaged. RO-41 crept forward. Nakagawa counted. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. All stop. Silence returned. The submarine drifted, momentum carrying it another few yards. Above, the destroyers continued their search pattern. No reaction. No convergence. The 4-second movement had occurred during the sonar gap, undetected. Nakagawa waited 10 minutes, then did it again. 4 seconds of movement, then silence. Over the next 40 minutes, he repeated the maneuver 8 times. Each time, RO-41 shifted position by 30 to 40 yards. Each time, the American sonar painted empty water where they expected a submarine. The destroyer pattern began to widen. Nakagawa heard it through the hydrophones, propeller sounds spreading out, searching a larger area. The Americans were losing confidence in their contact, but the hull was failing. At 280 feet, RO-41's pressure hull had been stressed beyond design limits for 47 minutes. Nakagawa saw the signs: a rivet weeping seawater, a weld line showing hairline cracks, a frame member bent slightly out of true. His executive officer approached. "Sir, recommend ascending to safe depth." Nakagawa shook his head. "Not yet. The Americans are still listening." "Sir, if the hull fails, if we surface, we die in 5 minutes. If the hull fails, we die in 30 seconds. I'll take the 30 seconds." It was brutal mathematics, but it was the only mathematics that mattered. At 52 minutes below the thermocline, the destroyer sounds began to fade. Nakagawa tracked them through hydrophones, propeller noise diminishing, search pattern expanding beyond effective range. At 58 minutes, the nearest destroyer was 4,000 yards away. At 62 minutes, Nakagawa gave the order: ascend to 200 feet, slow rise, maintain silent running. RO-41 climbed through the thermocline layer. The hull groaned with relief as pressure decreased. At 200 feet, Nakagawa checked for leaks, for damage, for any sign of structural failure. The submarine had held. Barely. But it had held. At 200 feet, Nakagawa faced a new problem: battery power at 22%. He couldn't run submerged much longer. He couldn't surface in daylight with 12 destroyers nearby. He needed night, and night was 6 hours away. The solution was brutal: drift. "Secure all non-essential systems," Nakagawa ordered. "Minimum life support only. We drift until dark." The crew shut down everything except depth control and hydrophones. The control room went dark, except for 2 emergency lights. Temperature rose as ventilation stopped. The air grew thick, stale, heavy with carbon dioxide. Nakagawa sat in the captain's chair and waited. For 6 hours, RO-41 drifted at 200 feet. The crew lay motionless to conserve oxygen. No one spoke. No one moved unless absolutely necessary. The only sounds were breathing and the occasional creak of the hull settling. Through the hydrophones, Nakagawa tracked the American destroyers. Their search pattern expanded to 25 miles across. They were hunting for a submarine that had vanished. Not sunk, not surfaced, just gone. At 1847 hours, the sun set. Nakagawa waited another 30 minutes for full darkness. Surface. Battle stations. RO-41 rose slowly. At 60 feet, Nakagawa raised the periscope and scanned the horizon. Empty ocean. The nearest destroyer lights were 8 miles to the southwest. At 1920 hours, RO-41 broke surface. Nakagawa opened the hatch and climbed to the bridge. The night air hit him like cold water. Clean, fresh, alive. Start diesels, charge batteries, course 285, full speed. The diesels roared to life. RO-41 turned northwest and ran at 17 knots, putting distance between itself and the American search grid. By midnight, RO-41 was 40 miles from the search area. Nakagawa ordered a dive to 150 feet and resumed patrol course toward the Philippines. In the control room, his executive officer approached. "Sir, how did you know the thermocline would be there?" Nakagawa pulled out a folded report from his pocket. The I-19 commander's observations from July. 1 paragraph, 15 sentences. The difference between life and death. I didn't know, Nakagawa said. I gambled. And if you'd been wrong? Then we'd be dead, and this conversation wouldn't be happening. The executive officer nodded slowly. The Americans have better technology, better sonar, better everything. Yes, but they don't have the ocean. Nakagawa smiled. They have the ocean. They just don't understand it the way we do. They trust their machines. We trust physics. Aboard USS Haggard, Commander James Ralston stared at the sonar plot in frustration. 12 destroyers, 8 hours of searching, 57 depth charge patterns, 0 results. The submarine had been there. QHB sonar had painted a clear contact at 0847 hours. Bearing 175, range 2,400 yards, depth 240 feet. Textbook detection. Then, nothing. The contact had vanished. Not faded, vanished. One moment on sonar, the next moment gone. Ralston had seen submarines evade detection before. They went deep, went silent, drifted with currents. But this was different. This submarine had disappeared while 12 destroyers maintained continuous sonar coverage. His sonar officer approached. Sir, I've been reviewing the recordings. At 0853 hours, we lost contact exactly when the target reached 265 feet. Mechanical failure? No, sir. All 12 destroyers lost contact simultaneously. Different equipment, different operators, same result. Ralston studied the chart. Water depth, 4,200 feet. Bottom composition, volcanic rock. Surface temperature, 82 degrees Fahrenheit. No unusual currents. No magnetic anomalies. What's the water temperature at 265 feet? He asked. The sonar officer checked his notes. We don't have that data, sir. We measure surface temperature for weather, but not deep layers. Ralston felt something click in his mind. Temperature, water density, sonar refraction. A thermocline, he said quietly. Sir? The submarine went below a thermocline layer. Our sonar beams bent upward instead of penetrating down. The target didn't disappear. It hid under a temperature barrier. The sonar officer looked skeptical. Sir, Japanese submarines don't have the depth capability to... This one did, or its commander was willing to exceed safe depth to reach the layer. Ralston walked to the chart table and made a notation. Thermocline layer, approximately 265 feet. Sonar ineffective below boundary. Recommend temperature profiling for future ASW operations. It was a lesson learned the hard way. American technology was superior. American tactics were proven. But the ocean itself could still hide an enemy who understood physics better than machines. 3 months later, Ralston's report would lead to the development of bathythermograph equipment on all U.S. destroyers, devices that measured water temperature at depth, mapping thermocline layers to eliminate sonar blind spots. But on October 11th, 1944, that technology didn't exist yet, and RO-41 was gone. November 3rd, 1944. RO-41 returned to Kura Naval Base after 47 days at sea. Nakagawa submitted his patrol report to the submarine command. 2 merchant ships sunk, 1 destroyer damaged. 1 escaped from 12 destroyer search group using thermocline concealment. The report circulated through the Imperial Navy Submarine Force. Within 2 weeks, every submarine commander in the Pacific had read Nakagawa's account of the thermocline escape. It became doctrine. When detected by American sonar, dive below the thermocline layer if water conditions permit. Accept hull stress. Accept risk. The alternative was certain death. But Nakagawa understood something his fellow commanders didn't want to accept. The thermocline wasn't a solution. It was a temporary advantage. The Americans would adapt. They would develop new technology, new tactics, new ways to eliminate the ocean's hiding places. They had the industrial capacity, the scientific resources, the institutional will to solve any problem. Japan had courage. Japan had skilled commanders. Japan had submarines that could exceed their design limits. But courage couldn't build destroyers faster than American shipyards. Skill couldn't overcome a 10-to-1 numerical disadvantage. Submarines couldn't win a war against an enemy that controlled the surface, the air, and the technology gap. Nakagawa sat in his cabin and wrote a letter he would never send. I escaped 12 destroyers today. I used physics they didn't expect. I survived because I understood the ocean better than their machines. But tomorrow, they will understand the ocean too. And then what advantage will we have? We are fighting a war we cannot win. We are buying time we cannot use. We are surviving battles in a campaign already lost. The Americans don't need to be smarter than us. They just need to be more numerous, more industrial, more systematic. And they are. RO-41 departed Kure on December 8, 1944, for its final patrol. On January 15, 1945, the submarine was detected by destroyer escort USS Conklin, 90 miles west of Luzon. Conklin was equipped with new bathythermograph equipment that mapped water temperature at depth. The destroyer escort tracked RO-41 through 2 thermocline layers. Depth charges detonated at precisely calculated depths. There were no survivors. Commander Nakagawa's patrol report on thermocline tactics was recovered from Japanese naval archives after the war. It became required reading at the U.S. Naval Submarine School, teaching American submariners the same physics that had saved RO-41 in October 1944. The ocean gives advantages to those who understand it, but technology eventually eliminates every advantage. In war, innovation buys time. It doesn't buy victory.